What's up guys, Firewolf here, showing you guys the Gigabyte AERO RTX 4090 Overclock Edition. This beauty only comes in this awesome white and silver color, which pairs perfectly with an all-white build. It has 24 gigs of VRAM and a core clock speed of 2535 MHz, which brings the retail price to a whopping $1,849, which is a $250 premium over the base 4090 Founders Edition. If you can find the non-overclock version, you can save about $50, but they're pretty rare to come by. Gigabyte recommends a 1000 watt power supply, and you also have to make sure that your PC case has enough space to accommodate this beefy card. Before we get into the benchmark, let's unbox the Gigabyte AERO 4090. Really excited to see how this looks. But first things first, this box looks a little plain, because if you're walking around and looking at graphics cards, you're not really going to know what it looks like. Thankfully, the back does show a little bit of what the GPU is going to look like. Obviously, it's going to be in the white color, white/silver. So I'm really excited to see how this looks. Alright, inside we're going to have a nice black box with Gigabyte on top. Alright, and the first thing we're going to be greeted to is this little Gigabyte envelope here. Let's see what we have inside. Alright, first thing we're going to see is a nice RO's warranty, installation guide, and a quick start guide, which is pretty standard. Alright, here we have the graphics card wrapped in some anti-static bag. Alright, moment of truth. Alright, and there we have it guys, the Gigabyte AERO 4090. It's definitely a very thick GPU, as you can see here. This thing is massive, but it does look really nice. I'm going to go ahead and peel this off later. Let's go ahead and see what else we get inside the box. So they're going to give us some metal parts here. This is like an anti-sag brackets. I'm not a huge fan of this style of anti-sag brackets. I prefer the pillar style, which I'll show you guys and link it down in the description box below. They're also going to give us the screws and hardware that are needed to install the brackets. All right, and this is the power adapter. Now, this being a 4090, it's gonna take up 4 PCIe slots, so it's definitely gonna take up a lot. And then this will convert to the new connector here, which is a 12-volt high power cable here. Now, if you have a newer power supply that already has this connector, then you're gonna be able to use that instead of this adapter here, because personally, this is just overkill. So I personally am using the streamer cable, so I don't even have to use this at all. All right, taking a closer look, let's go ahead and peel off all of this plastic piece. So this should be super satisfying. Let's go ahead and start off with a corner here. And damn, this thing looks really nice. I mean, I'm gonna personally vertical mount this AERO graphics card. I think it's gonna look really nice. So let's go ahead and tackle the bottom piece. And having this horizontally mounted will actually look really good as well. So you can see it's basically all more like a whitish silvery color. Definitely silver. And then on the other side over here is where the only RGB element of this is gonna be right here, where it says AERO over here. I would have personally liked to see some type of RGB lighting on this side here, but the only other RGB lighting we're going to have is over here. Now let's take a look at the connectors that we get. All right, so for ports, we're going to have one HDMI 2.1 and 3 DisplayPort 1.4 cables here. So if you need a GPU that has another HDMI 2.1, then you might have to look for another one, like the ROG Strix that I have. It has 2 HDMI 2.1 ports. So a lot of these GPUs have, you know, a different combination of these, but overall this graphics card looks beautiful. Just move this little sleeve here, and then right over here we have the BIOS selector here. If you want to make it silence or on the overclock here, so I'm gonna leave it under overclock, but if you ever want to switch it to silent, you can just switch that and that'll switch it to silent. But I'm gonna keep it at but I'm going to keep it at the overclocked, which is what this model is. This is an overclocked model here. All right, so let's go ahead and install this on my white gaming PC. All right, so here's the differences between the ROG Strix 4090 with the AERO 4090, and you can definitely tell that they have really different size. They almost look similar vertically, but the AERO visually looks larger. But when we start looking at the thickness of it, I mean, for me, I can visually tell that the AERO is a lot thicker, whereas the ROG Strix is longer. It obviously has an RGB lighting on the sides here, where the AERO only has RGB on here. So when it comes to lighting, I think the ROG Strix will look a lot better in an all-white build, but it does cost a lot more than the AERO itself. So I still think this is a nice looking card. So let's go ahead and vertically mount it. All right, got it mounted to the NZXT vertical mounts, which is the vertical mount that I'm using here. So let's go ahead and put it on my case. All right, now I have the AERO vertically mounted on my NZXT H9 Elite case. And what I used here is an anti-sag bracket, which I'll link in the description box below. I highly recommend this style, especially if you have bottom fans like this, because the anti-sag brackets are really good for horizontal, and everywhere else sometimes the fans block the other types of anti-sag. So I recommend this, because the RG Strix does give you a pillar style as well, which again, this is way superior, especially if you're going to vertically mount it. Another recommendation too is to make sure you're using some type of level, to make sure that you're leveling the card as well. You don't want it to sag, because one, is going to look horrible, and two, it's probably going to deteriorate your card over time. So make sure everything is nice and leveled to make it look as nice as possible. So now let's go ahead and fire this on and benchmark the hell out of this. All right, let's go ahead and fire this up. Now I have the glass panel open, of course, so we can see the insides a little bit better without the reflection of the lights. Power it on here. And it looks so good when the fans are spinning. And then I'm gonna put the front panel. All right, and it looks so good when everything is nice and closed. See a little close up here. Sorry for the reflections of the glass here, but you can see it looks so good on the H9 Elite. Definitely a very thick card, so make sure you have a PC case that can withstand the size of this. Testing out this AERO 4090 using 3D Mark benchmarks, I'll start off with their Speedway test, which measures 1440p GPU performance. I got a score of 9,891 with an average FPS of 98.92. Comparing it to the ROG Strix 4090, it was only about 0.5% less. Average temps were 64 degrees Celsius during this test, but keep in mind that temps can vary depending on your case, fan speeds, and surrounding room temperature. Comparing the same test between a 4080 Super and 4070 Ti Super, you can clearly see the 4090 gives you a nice increase in performance. Keep in mind though that the other tests were on my black build with the Ryzen 9 7900X, so I'm not sure how much that affects the scores, since the Speedway only measures GPU performance. Next benchmark is a TimeSpy Extreme, which runs 3 separate tests. 2 are GPU dedicated and 1 is CPU dedicated. Looking at just the GPU scores, we get a score of 18,547, which is almost a 30% increase over the ROG Strix 4080 Super that I benchmarked. On Modern Warfare 3, I ran a private match on Rust, testing out different graphics settings. The monitor I'm using is the Samsung G80SD OLED monitor, which has 4K resolution and a 240Hz refresh rate. Starting out with extreme graphics with NVIDIA DLAA and frame generation, I saw an average FPS of about 130 frames per second. Changing DLAA to DLSS set to quality, we get a nice bump up to an average of 184 frames per second. Next, I changed the DLSS to performance and got an average of 221 frames per second. And for faster performance, I reduced the graphics settings to ultra and changed the DLSS to ultra performance for an average of 260 frames per second. There are many ways to customize the graphics settings for better visuals, better performance, or something in between. So is the AERO 4090 overclock worth the price tag of $1,849? Well, considering that the white ROG Strix 4090 has a higher price tag of $2,100, I think the AERO 4090 offers more value while still looking fire on an all-white build. I recommend this card if you're planning on using it for 4K gaming, since this card would be overkill for a 1440p monitor. In my personal opinion,
I still find the ROG Strix to look better because of the RGB lighting and design. Whether that's worth an extra $250 is really up to your own perspective. Either way, the Aero is a beautiful white GPU, and if you want to save even more, you can always go for the 4080 Super, which is $700 cheaper with about a 30% difference in performance. You also won't need a 1000 watt power supply since the 4080 Super recommends 850 watts. For me, the performance of the 4090 is worth it to me, and this Aero 4090 deserves to be considered for your all-white build. If you're interested in getting the Aero 4090 or a complete list of my PC setup, I'll have affiliate links down below which helps and supports the Firewolf Tech channel. I hope this video was helpful for you guys, and I would love your support with a like, share, and subscribe. Firewolf out.